Good afternoon, everyone. The town of Hinton respectfully acknowledges that it is located on the First Peoples traditional lands. We recognize this traditional territory to show respect and understanding to those who walk the land since time immemorial. Today, we uphold our ongoing responsibility to work together in the spirit of the intent of the treaties with all the First Peoples and nations that call this place home. The town expresses gratitude for the opportunity to build a better community on these sacred lands for generations to come. And with that, I'd like to call this meeting to order at 4:01. Council, I'll entertain a motion to adopt the agenda. Councillor Hawes.
I'd like to move to adopt the agenda, special meeting of council for November 22nd.
Thank you, Councillor Hawes. Council, we have a motion on the floor. Any debate? Seeing none, I'll call to question. All those in favor? That is passed unanimously. That brings us to our action items for this afternoon. And the first one is the Evergreens Foundation Affordable Housing Hinton Project. And walking us through this will be the CAO of the Evergreens Foundation, Kristen Chambers.
Well, thank you, everyone, for having me here today to go over this. It's exciting to be here when we actually see the units are in town, they're on the ground, much different than the last time we sat around the table. So a ton of work has been done by the team here at the town of Hinton to pull that off. So definitely good work there. It's exciting to be here. This is the same presentation essentially that I had presented earlier to you guys. There was a lot of unknowns at that point, exactly where the lines would be drawn in different things, but I thought it's kind of prudent just to review that information again. And to talk a little bit about some of the eligibility, a little bit of the loose ends that we need to tie up so we can start looking at move-in dates, getting contracts signed with the town of Hinton, and looking at, wait list applications where I'm sure all of us are getting a lot of questions from the community. So getting a bit of that information clarity out there on what this looks like and making sure it's still in line with the vision of council and also what Evergreen sees as the need and where this is really going to fit into our housing as a whole in the community. So. So in the master resource document that was submitted in December 2020, that was the very first one, if you remember, where it was looking for 20 units was the original ask in the first rapid housing grant submission. So it was stated that the Evergreens Foundation as a housing management body, that we would work as a partner with the town of Hinton to make this project a reality. So in that original submission, the target population was to look at those at risk of homelessness and low-income seniors. But in the 2021 rapid housing submission, when it was resubmitted, the target population was adjusted. So the target population definition is a definition that comes from the federal government. So everywhere that we see this list, people and populations who are vulnerable, this is a federal definition. So it's not something Evergreens did, the town of Hinton, the province. This is what, as part of the Rapid Housing Initiative program, this is what the federal government wants you, these are the boxes you need to check and the demographics that you need to be actively trying to serve. So at that time, the municipality in their application said that they would make reasonable efforts to maintain the distribution. Oh, this should say of 8 units, I'm sorry. Among the following groups as indicated in their proposal, 4 units for Indigenous people and 4 units for people with physical disabilities. Now, although there are 10 units, those 2 extra units were developed just by your group. You were able to get more bang for your buck, I guess, for lack of a better word. But the amount of units that were indicated that you would try to maintain, that never changed. So there's no real definition around those additional 2 units. And again, the key word here is the municipality will make reasonable efforts. So we will not be leaving suites open, but certainly if we have, let's say, 2 people that applied at the same time, one has a physical disability, one does not, things like that. That's what we would take into consideration as we're weighing out the applications for the potential tenants. Again, always trying to make sure we're accountable to what the wishes of council were, and also, again, these target populations from the federal government. And please feel free to ask questions at any point of me, because it's a lot of information again. So don't hesitate to interrupt me.
I have Councillor Hawes.
Okay, thank you. So that's interesting, the 2 extra units, and it got me thinking. So those 2 extra units are not earmarked for this definition then? What if the town of Hinton were to say, and I'm just throwing this idea out there because it came to me. Let's say we have an intern having difficulty finding housing. Could we use those units for that purpose potentially, still getting the revenue, or say a contractor that we need a position, it's hard to find housing. Is that possible with those extra 2 units?
I would have to look into that for sure. My understanding of the contract is that although you did get additional 2 units that was still built with Rapid Housing Initiative
Okay.
funding. So you have 4 units for Indigenous people, which we'll try to maintain, 4 with physical disabilities. The other 2 units would still have to meet the target population. So as you could see, it could be young adults, veterans, any other group, right, within that target population. But the 2 keys for eligibility will be you meet this target population, which could be just that you're a senior, quite frankly, and that your income is below the income threshold, which we'll get to in a bit. So that's going to be your two key pieces for being eligible to live in this housing, below that income threshold, which is set out. And again, we don't make that up. That comes from the government, that comes down to us every year. And that's the same information that we always use with our all of our other programming as well. So eligibility is based on that. It's different in Hinton than it is in Edson, all of that. And then that other piece is meeting that somewhere in that target population.
Okay, that makes sense. And so it's still under the Rapid, so.
Yeah, and like anything in our world, if we had a vacancy, which I can't see happening, let's say we had a vacancy, we couldn't get 1 unit rented and we could use it as a bit of transitory housing for a short period of time. We would always look at that, ways to keep the revenue stream obviously flowing and meeting the needs of the community, but it definitely wouldn't be a long-term solution.
Okay, back to you, Kristen.
Right. So the rent model. So the rent model that was submitted in your application to CMHC is that all units must serve and be affordable. And the definition of affordable in this context is that they're paying less than 30% of their gross income on housing, or the shelter component of the provincial assistance program as an equivalent. Now, that is a mouthful. So what that means is the tenants will be paying 30% of their gross income as rent. That is something that will be annually recalculated. So income goes up, income goes down. Those changes will be made as necessary. The shelter component of the provincial assistance program is if somebody is on income supports, and that is their main form of income, there's a provincially regulated scale that must be followed. And so that would put you in a minimum rent scenario of around $330 a month for someone who is on income support. And then if they had a child, that would go up because their payments would be going up. So that again is a regulation outside of anything that we control, but it was dictated in the rent model that we would be either doing 30% of income, or for those on income support program through Alberta Works, there is a shelter component that would be dictated, that would be paid. The affordability must be maintained for a minimum of 40 years. Now, that was one thing that we had talked about in some of the documentation, that we've been using the term 20 years, but it is actually 40-year affordability. So we're in it for the long haul with these units, but they're exactly what the community needs. So again, CMHC may require incremental validation throughout that 40-year period. We have absolutely no idea what that could potentially look like. A lot of times when you enter into agreements with the different groups, you end up in a position where they say, this is the type of reporting, we need you to do this quarterly, we need you to do this annually. And there's absolutely zero indication from the federal government what that could look like. So that's when we get into our application process. And we're looking at, okay, how do we prove, if we get a 10-year audit, that we were letting, so we keep all that documentation in-house. Again, we're audited every year. We're used to this reporting structures, and that's something that would be done through the Evergreens Foundation to vet out that I'm meeting everything that you had set out to CMHC within that document and understanding that accountability to the federal government for that, if they ask for it, if and when. So we just have to make sure that we're keeping that. And obviously this rent model and assuring that is also part of our annual financial audit, which obviously this will be a leg of as well. So they're looking to make sure that we really are charging rents appropriately. They'll do a sampling. And of course, that audit is something that I will submit to the town annually as well. So the little table at the bottom here is the CMHC MMR, stands for median market rent. So they're stating what these amounts potentially could be. But again, these median market rents are always going up annually. It's just kind of showing what the RGI is, that rent geared to income portion. So there's again 3 income types that we expect that we would see coming into these units. So number 1 is of course your working income. So that would be 30% of gross earned household income would be payable as rent. And so this can vary greatly depending on employment status. So if you have somebody working as a casual somewhere, you have somebody that's working part-time, you have somebody working full-time, you have a couple that are both working full-time. There could be a lot of different scenarios. There could be variations by season. And so we'll see that too, where, you know, maybe there's a higher rent charge during a certain season where someone is working and then they have a bit of an off season where maybe they're laid off for a period of time. So we do get a lot of flux with that working income. Seniors income, again, that is much more stable. Not everyone receives maximum benefits, of course, but this scenario is based on the current seniors maximum income, if they're receiving all their benefits, what that rent could look like. And then, of course, we have AISH. Now, we've heard announcements recently from the provincial government that AISH is looking like it will be indexed again, which is amazing. So, of course, currently it's at 1685, but we're looking to obviously see an increase in that for the next budget year. So we'll see where that goes. But again, that would be the 30% of income. And really, when we look at our wait list, and I will talk about that again, I've said it several times, and any of you that have spent much time with me, we always talk about it's that single person under 65 on, on a fixed income that really struggles. They can't get into family housing. That's really that market where we see these 1-bedroom units are going to be such a lifesaver in that demographic. And a lot of that could be potentially seniors or those on AISH. So we're really looking forward to being able to address that market of people better within the community. That's good. So this just talks about that income support scale that I talked about previously. So if you were on income support, if you were a single person, your rent would be $330. If you had 1 child, $558, 2 children, $578. And again, that is all set by the provincial government and just something that we would follow. So that's pretty cut and dry. So eligibility. So again, this would be based on need. So in simple terms, their annual income falls below the income threshold. And then it would be the applicant at risk, those demonstrating other risks, for example, whether that's risk of homelessness or whatever that is, and then meeting that definition of target population. So those are really going to be the two biggest pieces. This was just a little bit of I did not update these 8 top numbers from my last meeting because our wait list moves daily. So this was just what that was at the time to give you an example of the mix that could potentially, look at moving into these units. I think the thing that's important to recognize is, I think the first question the community is always asking is, well, how do you get on the list? Who's at the top of the list? How are you going to decide who goes in there? And really with the blessing of council, of course, what the Evergreens would really like to do is to be able to look kind of holistically at the whole community and all the housing that's offered. And, we may have single people that are living in a private accommodation right now, receiving a rent subsidy that could be properly housed within these new units, which would free up a rent subsidy for a small family. So there's some work that we're going to be doing for sure to look at who's currently in our program and who is this really going to best serve. We know that the link, between Pine Valley and the location, there may be people that are, at risk of high isolation. They may benefit from maybe some of the meal programs, home care, exercise, et cetera, different things that Pine Valley has to offer, which could make living in that area, it could really help to extend their term of independence and the amount of time that they're able to live independently. So again, you're meeting those eligibility criteria as number one, but we want to see this as part of that offering of all of Evergreens and not as an island, but where we're able to really use this to make the biggest amount of impact for the community. And I really think that's the best way to do it and not, really look at it kind of holistically. So I did send out that pro forma again, and that the spreadsheet pro forma. I mean, you can type numbers into it any which way that you want. That again, that was what was submitted to CMHC in the initial application process. But essentially, it was that it would be a bit of a break-even operation. That's obviously what we're going for. But there is that reality that if we're faced with very low rents, which we may be because we're going to be serving people based on need, if we have issues with difficult move-outs, if we have tenant evictions, if we have substantial damages, flood, any number of things that could happen, it doesn't speak to necessarily the responsibilities of where those finances come from. And that's what I had spoken about at our other meeting, is that Evergreens is not able, this isn't the lodge program. This is completely different housing. This isn't something we requisition deficits for. Any deficits coming from this program in that scale would need to be picked up through the town of Hinton. And if that is through a annual subsidy that's given a certain amount per month that's put into like a maintenance reserve, different things like that. That's something that that council will have to decide on and make some decisions going forward. But that's definitely a risk that needs to seriously be considered, because we need to be in a position that, if a suite does need to turn over quickly, we do have some damages. Again, sometimes we are housing a population that can be difficult to house for a variety of reasons. That we're able to properly maintain the asset, maintain it to the standards of Evergreens, and get that asset back in the housing stream as soon as possible. And I prefer to be proactive, not reactive. So the reality is, at some point in those 40 years, this is going to be that conversation. And I would like to have something that's consistent and ironed out now that makes sense. Everybody understands the accountability and responsibility for that. And we move ahead with something that everybody's comfortable with. So that's something we can talk about at another
I
time.
have a couple of people in queue.
Yep.
Councillor LaBerge.
So you've done this for a while, and I know you have units outside of Pine Valley as well. What would you be comfortable having in reserve for 10 units to be able to realistically move forward? I mean, we're going through a pretty tough budget right now, but I mean, without having done, are we talking about 50 grand, 10 grand? What's your feeling, Kristen?
I feel somewhere in that $10,000 to $20,000 range is sufficient. As a bit of a, let's call it a nest egg with a new building, new facility moving in as maybe a year one. I think $10,000 would be reasonable. That's probably enough to do a good renovation on a suite if you needed to, or, we may find things we need to tweak here and there that maybe weren't thought about right away in the building process. There's always that period where you're like, oh, we should have done this, or got to move in a downspout or do some, whatever those little pieces are. So I think initially a $10,000 reserve would be good. And maybe adding to that in a future year as, maybe in year two, not this budget, but the one following, once we've kind of had them in action. And then the intention would be that, Of course, any deficits would come out of that, but also any profits would naturally be fed into there. So we're not doing this as a for-profit venture at Evergreens. We're here to break even, and our fees in that pro forma, we're here to just cover our costs. And any money that's left would then naturally be put into that reserve account as well. Whether we call it maintenance reserve, operating reserve, whatever the title is. So with the province, how it works is we, and it could go anyway, and but when we have some housing, we have one, the house at McPherson that we have. That is one house that runs alone in its own program. And so we hold the reserve account on behalf of the province for that. And that's the same way that one works. We have a bit of a, some wiggle room in there if we need it. We don't tap into that money without without written consent from the province. So if I needed to go into that, I would be coming to you for permission from council to spend money. And then anything additional that we have would obviously be fed into that account, and that would just grow for future capital or whatever that would be.
Councillor Hawes.
Thank you. I guess this is building off of that to administration. With that in mind, because we had our first look at our budget, but I don't recall this being part of that discussion. Is administration preparing to bring a number potentially for future conversations for 2023 for this project in regards to reserve contributions to start it off? And secondly, it's the responsibility, if I recall, of the landlord to furnish with appliances. And I guess my question to administration is that all included in the grant, or is that something outside of the grant that we're also going to have to supply financially?
Through the mayor to council, I'll refer that to Debbie, if that's okay.
Thank you.
Through the chair, to all of council. Yes, the suites already have all their appliances in them.
Okay.
Part of the grant funding.
Okay. And my first question in regards to building off that reserve for 2023, the sooner we start that, the better. Is that a plan to bring that number potentially to us for the November 29th meeting?
Through the mayor, I'll refer that to our Director of Corporate Services, Ms. Barbeau. Have we budgeted for, we'll say, a contingency for maintenance for these units?
I'll be sure that there's one in there when it comes to council.
Thank you.
Councillor Race.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Quick question, Kristen. All the properties that Evergreens takes care of, do you periodically go in to, check in on the tenants, check in on how they're taking care of the property?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. So what we do actually is we start everyone off on a 3-month lease. And it has been the best program that we have ever done. It was another housing management body that gave me that advice. So you're able to go in, and again, because we're working with vulnerable population, you may move in a senior that you think is quite independent and find out, maybe this isn't the best place for them. They can't be on the 3rd floor of Lions Manor. They need to be on the 1st floor, or different things like that. So what we do is we move everyone in on a 3-month lease. At the 2-month mark, we go through and we do a full inspection. We open the fridge, we visit with the tenant, we walk through. We obviously check to make sure they're paying their rent okay, they're managing with everything. How are they doing? What does that house look like? Are they adapting to that community? Some people need that congregate living, they do better in a Lions Manor than they would in an independent unit like these are. So we use Madonna Popwell, who's our client services manager. She's incredible. And so she goes there with the site manager and then looks to see, is there other resources within the community this person might not be accessing that they could. So we really do that as a number one, checking on the asset, but really checking on the tenant and how they're climatizing to their new place. And is it the right place for them? If it's not the right place for them, then what we would be doing is serving a 30-day notice that their lease will not be renewed. And we would be working with them in those 30 days to house them either in a different program, maybe move them into a rent subsidy program, maybe they apply for Pine Valley, whatever that case may be. But if they're not a good fit, then we'll work with them to get them into the program that is the right fit, and work through that. But definitely the regular visits are very important, especially from a maintenance perspective. You find that leaky tap that can cause you all the problems, or those little things. And it's just good to have that keep that eye on things.
And back to you, Kristen.
So the next steps for building the program. So when presented to you guys last time, I think, we were trying to figure out what was the best way to fit this in. How are we going to see this program running? Am I running two separate programs? Is this kind of a subsidiary of the program I have? Are we going to do a whole application change? And in part of red tape reduction, I guess is what I'm going to call it. The reality is, as we were trying to build this application specific for these units, we realized we're asking for the same information over and over again. We have an application program that works. And then people that are coming in would be coming in, they'd be applying for all of our programs. We would be looking globally at them saying, how can we fit you in if we have a house open up on Tamarack, or if we have a tiny home open up, or we have a rent subsidy open up. So that's really the best for the individual, is that they're being looked at, not just waiting for one little thing to open. They may decline other housing that we offer them and say, no, I want to wait for that unit, which is okay. But at least they're being given options, because it could be a long wait time, right? So what we've decided to do and what was presented is that we would just create an application addendum. So that addendum is just basically saying, number one, are you interested in those units? So if you have 5 kids, maybe you're not going to be interested. And if you are, do you meet any of these target populations? So they would check off that they do, they would sign that, and and that's really it. So for the majority of the people, they're filling out our applications anyways. This is just a simple way to say, yes, I'm interested in this type of housing at that location. And yes, I meet these populations. That piece of paper is naturally going to give us also that data that we send to CMHC, when they ask for that reporting structure. So we can say, yes, we have checked this. Our applicants have, we have 10 people living in here and they all meet this criteria. And the other thing that we needed to do was to create a lease specific for the facilities. So one of the most exciting and difficult things about working in this type of housing is when somebody is able to move themselves through the housing. So, they've come in a very needy situation and they're able to, maybe it's finish that schooling, they land the job that they want. How do we successfully transition that person from subsidized housing into the private market? So what I actually did is I got the lease that Happy Creek is using. So Happy Creek has a very similar situation. Obviously, they're affordable housing as well. And again, we don't need to reinvent the wheel. We want to be all working in alignment, as although Happy Creek is operated independently from Evergreens, it's still a provincially regulated program that they run, and they have a very good system. So it does give 6 months notice. And I think that is absolutely the minimum and fair, because you want people to be able to, there's a lot that goes into, you're getting this new job, all of a sudden, maybe you're paying for childcare and you've never had to do that. You need to get, find another place to live. You need to get your damage deposit. You've got to set up accounts for your utilities. There's a lot of costs and things. So having that 6 month buffer to say, you know what, we've got you here, and likely at a higher rent. So we would do a rental adjustment. It would be based again on that 30% of their current income, but give them that time to properly move into the private housing market, and not saying, okay, boom, you got your job, now you got to be out in 30 days. So it's very common with all the housing management bodies that there's about that 6 month window. Most people won't take the 6 month window. In my experience, it's usually about 3 months. And because they're excited, they're making better money, they want to, move up to that next level in their life as well. But it's nice that we have that flexibility within the lease where we can do that if it's required, especially if it's a tight housing market. It can be difficult to find appropriate housing sometimes.
I have a few counselors in
Yep.
queue. Counselor Haas.
Yeah, I guess along that lines, the other side of it, which is great, that's the, getting a job, moving on. Where's the incentive to that motivation to do that? Because I see, the possibility of somebody getting into affordable housing and then, really kind of feeling comfortable there. It's being subsidized. It's what's the need to improve, right? Thinking of, say, a refugee that comes and, goes to school, but get a job. So what incentive for people to get out of the affordable housing, because I guess I know that's not an easy answer, obviously, but, because yeah, I don't know what the rules are to that, but, that's the only worry, because we have that long wait list and somebody's utilizing it when they could able-bodily move on, but they're not. So.
Well, quite frankly, as most of you know, there was some pretty aggressive work done over the last couple of years on the affordable housing strategy under Minister Pon with seniors and housing. And it was for exactly those reasons, because right now there is no incentive. So the province is actively looking, and part of the 19 recommendations that came out of that affordable housing review was, how do we not penalize people for bettering themselves? And how do we help them move through this continuum of housing? And, and there is some that need it long-term, people on fixed incomes, that AISH, that CPP disability, seniors, et cetera. But how those that are able to amend their situation, how do we support them through it instead of saying, oh, good, you made more money this month, now hand me over this extra additional rent, right? So it's a difficult, sticky point in the whole province, and one that they are looking at. But yeah, the reality is there is not an incentive.
Okay.
At the moment.
And that's there are some that will fit for a long period of time, but it's the others that taking up that space that could move on. So that's good to know. Thank you.
Counselor LaBerge.
Thanks. So what's the mechanism, Kristen? I mean, do you do more than an annual review of income, or is it just on a honor basis? You come and tell us if your circumstance has changed. I mean, it's kind of an annual review, isn't it?
Yes. So at minimum, it's an annual review. If we feel that there's been a substantial change, we can ask for, and now again, I'm operating this program in my mind loosely around the provincial guidelines. Number one, because they work, and that's a legislation, but we will have more flexibility within your program because it's not sitting on my Schedule A of my ministerial order, right? So we do have some more flexibility for sure. Every time their income goes down, I can tell you 100% of the time they come and tell us.
Yeah, of course.
But not always when it goes up. But yeah, at minimum, we do an annual review, and it's a year from when they move in. With the seniors, it's always based on line 150. So it's at tax season, right? We usually do it then. In the family and more independent housing units, it's a year from when they move in. So we would be lining that up with their lease renewals. They'd have, those type of things. But if we see them working uptown and they're claiming they have no income, et cetera, we would just be approaching them and trying to navigate carefully those situations.
So once a year and sort of ad hoc outside of that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Counselor Taylor.
I understand you want to look at this project holistically with all your housing, but there might be some counselors who think that this was supposed to be a seniors project because the land was purchased that way. The objective of the property in the first place was to have seniors in there. So if council chose to concentrate the priority for housing on seniors, is that within our purview?
I think naturally the location of that property and the style of units will lend itself to older single adults, quite frankly. Council certainly can, again, we have the 4 Indigenous units. We have the 4 people with physical disabilities. That doesn't mean that they're not seniors. I mean, certainly seniors is part of that list for sure. I agree. I was there for the discussions, way back about the original intent of some of this land and seniors housing. I had actually looked at building my own units on there, if you recall, way back. before we did what we did at Pine Valley. But there's a huge older adult population that hasn't quite yet turned 65 that I think we would really be remiss to not be looking at on a regular basis. This is maybe the 55 plus crowd. This is the ones that aren't quite seniors yet. They're not going to catch Lions Manor. Maybe they don't quite need that much, living in that model, but there's a lot that are just on that cusp of, maybe their kids have grown up and left home and they're on a fixed income. They don't quite qualify for Pine Valley. They're not scoring high enough to get into my rent subsidy program, but they're still an excellent fit for moving into there and probably staying there through their senior years. So, again, when I say look at it holistically, that really is looking at that older adult. They're single 1-bedroom units. Yes, there is 2 bedrooms, which could end up being a senior couple. It could be, we have some on our wait list that are a senior parent with an older adult child that they're still looking after for a variety of reasons. I mean, there's a lot of interesting demographics there. So, but I do believe, looking at my wait list and what those needs are, that we are looking at an older adult population. I don't know if that helps, and they would likely move in and stay. I don't feel there would be a ton of turnover within these units. I believe that they would be coming in and staying until that point they needed a Pine Valley or different.
I think that was the original objective of it all.
It was, and then it was changed in the second submission.
Yeah, to get some money.
But our hands aren't tied to that. I really feel that, again, that older adult piece, and that will work into the young, the 60s, 63s, in those areas. My programs don't, if we have vacancies at Lions Manor, we certainly do look at that, who is a good fit for Lions Manor that is in that older adult population, and we'll move them in. We do that now if we can. But the reality is there isn't a lot in our community that's going to meet that need for that group. That sustainable long-term housing for those on fixed incomes is a huge issue in Alberta, not just in Hinton. So
thanks.
I'll follow up on that question. Just, are there any openings or input periods in the future for us to share some of our concerns regarding the scoring matrix? Does that stay with you, or is there an opportunity for us to say, hey, we're getting certain pressures, A, B, and C, or does that remain on your side? Because I ultimately want to just, I trust what the Evergreens does. I've sat on the board for many years, but it's a question we do get asked. So what input do we have, if any, and what does that look like potentially?
Well, if you use the model of what we do with the province, essentially that stays with the management body, that stays with us and basically our right to manage these units. You're handing that over to us saying, we're the caretaker. Now, what happens with the province is if somebody in the community does not like a decision that we've made, they have concerns, they absolutely have that ability to come to, if in the province, it's our housing advisor, it's the MLA. So here it would be, to the CAO, to yourselves as counselors. And, definitely we provide all the information, all of the backup, all of those things. But I wouldn't want to be in a position where you would be getting into the who's scoring what and why are they scoring. Information sharing, absolutely. Sitting down and having meetings with people that maybe don't understand how the program's working, absolutely. But getting into the daily details of how we're scoring and why on certain applications, I think is a little too administrative personally.
Thanks for that clarity. Councillor Haas.
Yeah, just a couple of things. And I have a quick question about the application, but we have to remember too, that this is just one piece of those lands that we're servicing. There's still a large area that we can focus on different, age groups of the community. This was just an earmark for getting our, some development in that area, which gave us the opportunity for getting the infrastructure in place for phase 2. So, because I appreciate the fact that many of the units may be taken up by seniors, but there's still lots of opportunity there for seniors. I just have one question though about the application, and I think I kind of know it, but I wanted to clarify it. When you look at the application, there's 4 places you can submit to locations. There's an Edson one and there's an Evansburg one with 2 Hinton ones. I'm assuming that we would just be looking for Hintonites in those areas. So there, we wouldn't be bringing anybody from Edson to those units at all if there's no place for them there or Evansburg. Is that correct?
That's correct. So the Evergreens Foundation has a residency policy.
Okay.
And what that means is that you would need to be a resident of your current community for 6 months. Or again, if there was vacancies and you just moved to Hinton, then we would look at it on a case by case basis. But no, we would not be moving from community to community to fill those spaces.
Awesome. Thank you.
Councillor Laberge.
One more follow-up question, and it's really focused on what Councillor Taylor asked. So given the definition provided by the federal government as people, vulnerable peoples and populations, I mean, you wouldn't be able to say, well, no, we're going to put seniors in there. I mean, there's a long list of people who qualify. Don't they rent score? And as long as they're on that list, qualify? And I just, because I'm curious on how prescriptive that federal program is.
So it's not as prescriptive as what we would see provincially in our housing. So what we see when we do, let's say the scoring process for Pine Valley Lodge or the scoring process that happens for Lions Manor, those are very different from this. So what the federal government has asked of us is that you're making that reasonable effort, again, for those 4 and 4, those 2 groups, that they're below that income threshold and that they're checking one of these boxes. Now, I agree, it would be very difficult for me to say the only one of these that we're going to pick is seniors. But if we have 6 seniors out of 10 units, that's not going to cause a problem with the province because we are still meeting a target population. They're below the income threshold and, you know, they're still meeting that. And we've made a reasonable effort to accommodate these groups. So that's really what it is. The seniors is still listed in there. And there might be seniors that check several boxes. It's a veteran senior with a physical disability. That's a very high possibility that that's what we're going to have. But it's not as prescriptive like the other programs where you're scoring like a 51 points, 52 points. It's going to be, do you check these boxes? When did you apply? What is that best fit?
Councillor Taylor.
Thanks. Has there been some sort of assessment on the costs of social externalities we could be saving by getting into this type of housing? You know, like lower medical costs, lower social services, those kind of costs. Because what I've noticed is every time you see one of these projects kind of explained on TV, you get like the mayor of Edmonton saying he's going to save a ton of money over here because of lower social service, externalities. So there are savings realized that some of these people are, you know, talking about on television, and that's why they justify these kind of programs. So if that is in fact true, and there are some sort of savings on these third-party externalities, social externalities that seem to be provincial government programs that are saving, could we make some sort of assessment of the savings on this multi-government program and make it a multi-government program and then ask the provincial government for some sort of recoup on some of those savings costs? Maybe they could come up with a damage deposit or a small amount per year to help subsidize the costs. I'm serious. I'm not making a joke. I mean, every time I see somebody on TV, that's what they say. That's how they justify these programs. So let's document those savings, make an estimate, and say, okay, provincial government, you know, you can actually help us with this project. Let's make this a true federal, provincial, municipal project. Give us the $10,000 damage deposit, contribute whatever the amount, $10,000 a year to helping us cover some of the costs in this program.
Where I really see that coming in is not so much in the operating basis. I think currently with the way that the province is working on their affordable housing strategy, it's not so much in funding the daily operational costs, but where I see we have an opportunity is with any future capital. So when we look down the road at, we need to replace furnaces, we need to replace windows, we've got to do roofing, we need to do different things as the projects age, absolutely, that's the information that we use to build a case and say, we've been able to do this in our community. It has taken pressure off of, these issues. It's been so successful. And that's when we start hitting those grant programs. And so there's grant programs through FCM. There's grant programs through CMHC. There's some that come out from the province, and we're very aggressive working with Colliers. Actually, they work with us a lot on making sure that we're up on these, what's available to access those grants. So that's where I see us really being able to leverage some of that information, is in that story to hopefully get on the ahead of some of these capital projects, which naturally do come up as the buildings age.
Thanks.
Councillor Race.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So Kristen here, under Town of Hinton things to do. If we did say, yes, we're going to pay the water, sewer, and the waste, and we will pay the insurance on each building, do you have a total cost for the year for those 10 units?
Yeah, we can, that was, I think some of that information was in the pro forma, but that's a bit of, I mean, I'm not sure what the intention is of you guys take some of those conversations offline. I don't know if you want to speak to that, into the details of some of those things, but essentially what I need to be able to see is when it's at Town of Hinton to do, and it's trying to I need to come up with what that real true operational pro forma looks like. The pro forma that was submitted was the one, again, that went in with the application, and we've made a couple adjustments based on a few things. But once I know what you guys are willing to help with, then I can come up with that clear number of what may I need as that maintenance reserve. Because if we have to pay all the water, sewer, if I've got to, bring Northland Maintenance and or whoever to come in and do the snow removal, and I've got to get the grass cut, and I have to do all these things, well, that's going to add to my costs, which may potentially add to the amount of maintenance reserve that we could potentially use. So it's kind of that cart before the horse. We've got to figure out some of those things. And being an area of town that the town has been clearing the pathways and sidewalks around there, they've been mowing that patch of grass for however long, it's just that conversation that needs to come up of what is the town willing and able to do to try to help us keep this as sustainable as possible. And, maybe if we hit certain levels saying, you're okay to continue with all of these items, well, maybe that maintenance, that maintenance amount goes down, maybe only need so much reserve. So, but that's something you guys have to discuss internally.
How soon would you need that information?
I'm going to go to CEO Panasic.
So through the mayor to members of council. So I think what we'll do after this meeting, depending on the decision that's made here today, is we would go back with Kristen and we would work with staff to work through all the details of this, because there's a lot of these little decisions that we need to decide whether they're best to be kept with the municipality, or maybe they are best or more efficient to be kept with the Evergreens Foundation. So I think with the council's blessing, we would go off, come up with a service agreement that we believe would be in the best interest of all parties, and bring it back to council for ultimate approval.
Thank you.
Councillor LaBerge.
Well, and to follow up on that, I guess it's irrelevant, because if there's not enough money to cover it, we're on the hook for all of it anyhow. So we can decide to pay it up front, or we can pay it later. So really what we're talking about here is a shell game. We're on the hook for all of it. And so regardless of what we decide to do, it in final mathematics at the end of the year, it doesn't matter, correct?
Exactly. And I think it's more, is there efficiencies in, number one, how do you want that reflected within your books? Is it easier to, fund us this grant or maintenance reserve? Excuse me. Or is it easier to, write off some of those costs? And I have multiple agreements with different municipalities that all go different ways. Some say, you know what, we just want to write you a check, this flat amount every year, run your business. It's clean and it's simple. And others say, you know what, we can be more efficient by using our staff at a lower rate. We find efficiencies in doing certain things, and we'd like to continue doing that. But, that's certainly up for the town to determine what suits you guys best. I'm good with it either way. But the reality is, regardless, it's on your shoulders.
Councillor Taylor.
sort of decisions are expected from us tonight?
No.
Was this just for information? Then we'll figure that out later?
CO Panasic?
Through the mayor to members of council. So my understanding is that we're going to have a discussion on demographics. And I believe that the question here is, do we want to provide the Evergreen Foundation with the latitude to run their business as a housing authority based on the criteria that was applied to through the grant? And for council to be aware of that. And if council's okay with moving forward in that regard, then the Evergreen Foundation and the town would have to come up with a service agreement that would accomplish exactly that, I think, is the process that we're looking at here.
And just to follow up on that, so no direct motion tonight, something would be coming for decision in an upcoming meeting?
Through the mayor, members of council. So the service agreement we would bring back to council for your ultimate approval, but I think we wanted to provide this early and often, so council's aware, so it's everybody's up to speed when we do bring these forward.
Councillor Taylor?
Yeah. So you just said that we have the flexibility to decide on the demographic mix. That's not what I kind of heard during the discussion.
So essentially what I am here to do is present how a little bit of an updated version on how Evergreens feels that this should run. And with your blessing to continue to move ahead we are in a major time crunch though, because these units will be moving in, they will be ready to be inhabited. There will be utility costs and those things that are coming. And we obviously want to get people in as soon as possible. So these decisions will have to be made fairly quickly. But the reality was this, I mean, this is my presentation on, this is what you submitted to the federal government. This is how I see it working. Do we have your blessing to move forward to create that service agreement, then working with the town administration?
Councillor Haas?
Yeah, I'm not sure where you're at in all, but I did have a couple questions on the agreement or comments. I don't know if we're at that point yet or, okay.
Yes.
So just a couple of things on insurance. So what I'm reading here is that, and I'm assuming, but as a tenant, they have to have renter's insurance in order to access the unit. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. I mean, I'm all aboard on that because I'm very familiar with that. My question is, if they are unable to financially, like, where are we at with that? Because I agree they should, but in reality, is all of those vulnerable able to?
Yeah, so that's actually a really excellent question. So we always say that it is required. We always ask for copies of it. We always do our best to work with different insurance providers and individual people to get it. It's not very expensive, but in a fixed income situation, that $20 a month can be groceries. It puts everyone in a really tough place. The reality is if they don't have it, they're risking that an insurance company, if they leave a tap on or they leave their windows open and the pipes freeze or whatever the situation is, the insurance company will go after them. And, if you're kind of in that precarious place, some people get it, they give you the certificate and they cancel it because they can't afford it. So we always do that due diligence. The town will be, again, retaining ownership of these buildings for the next 40 years at least. So, the town will be having to carry the building portion of the insurance. Evergreens Foundation will carry all the operating insurance. So we'll have our own general liability insurance that we carry for everything else, as well as professional insurance, crime, any of those things from our staff side of things. But the physical building insurance is carried by the town. And much like probably CAO Panasic doesn't know this whole story yet, but much like the Tamarack, the municipal units on Tamarack that we have, those are actually insured by the town and they get invoiced to us. So again, that may be something that is invoiced through to this program, but again, still going to be a cost to the town. But that's how that Tamarack property works.
So under the rules, and I'm not sure where Evergreens falls on this, but I'm seeing and hearing a lot where renters are not allowed barbecues for one, because it's a high risk. If one building goes up, then it takes the rest of them. Portable heaters, things like that. So I don't see that in here. Is that something that your other units allow? Is it something that we could look at as to limiting that? Because it is quite a risk. If a fire does happen, those propane tanks are there. So any comment on that or any thoughts on adding that?
Yeah, definitely something we can certainly add. Again, this was a bit of an example of what we want to take a look at. Generally, what we try to do in some of our other sites is to potentially set up a barbecue area. Okay. So maybe we have a concrete pad with something there that's set up in a certain spot with one propane bottle, and it always gets stolen or something happens to it naturally. That's just the way it goes. But, so we try to look at, we want to maintain that quality of life and independence. So sure, somebody should be able to barbecue a steak, but how do we do that safely? Mm-hmm. And so we can definitely look at that. They will not have a large area on their front step to be lugging in a big barbecue, but we've been really successful with having certain, certain barbecue areas, or even setting up barbecue nights where maybe the maintenance guy and the manager come down and they drop off a barbecue and say, okay, Friday nights, we're going to have this out here and we're going to clean it all up on Saturday. We'll be treating it like a community as much as they are going to be standalone units. We will look at that. Portable heaters, lamps that somebody dug out of a granary from a farm and they try to bring in, all of those things we look at as they move in. We actually have our maintenance guys check different devices. They look at, if it's old 2-prong lamp, well, maybe we can get it properly wired for them. We try to help out with that as much as possible. Portable heaters are a tough one. But with the way that the heat is in these buildings, every room is kind of individually zoned because it's, with the electric heat. So it's going to be probably less of an issue because they're going to have that ability. If they want their bedroom warmer, they just turn up only their bedroom versus that whole suite. So I think with some of the different ways this building was designed, it might be a little bit less of an issue. You're never going to get away from it entirely, but we certainly try as part of our walkthroughs to really keep an eye for those items.
Okay. And just the premise, I don't want to get into the weeds, but it is our buildings, it's our liability. I think it's important we consider some of these factors to try and mitigate. So thank you.
100%. Yeah.
Councillor Taylor.
Yeah, so you want a motion for us to authorize you to work with Evergreens Foundation to go ahead and work on some of the necessary agreements? I guess that's what I get out of it. And then what? When you reach and then you go and you finish the project, or do you come back and touch base with us at some future point, or how does that work?
So through the mayor to members of council, what we're providing today, I believe, is how we see this working with the demographics that the Evergreen Foundation would work with to people into these units. If council's okay with that type of arrangement, I think that's the really the direction we're looking for today, is an agreement that we want to go forward with that type of arrangement. We would come back with all of the details that would be necessary, who's going to mow the grass, who's going to pick up the water bill, all of those little details. And we'll work together just to make sure that however we're doing it is the most efficient possible. And I think we would bring that back to council in order to approve prior to final execution. But that's the way that I believe that we'd like to proceed.
The intent is to move. We do not wish to, unless it's council's desire, of course, we would like to move people in as soon as possible, not wait until it's 100% complete and then move 10 people in. So as those units are ready, we want to be able to fill them. And it's very important for me, and I believe the town as well, to be able to go through and say, we need people to start getting on that wait list, filling out that application, and understanding what that is. And as of this point, we haven't been able to do that. So after this meeting with understanding, if council says, yes, we're good with that addendum, you can use your existing application strategy. We can start then looking at who's on our list, getting that wait list started, diving into those details. I'm assuming that we'll work together and say, you have option A of putting this much in a operating reserve, you have option B of the town providing these services, something like that, and come up with it, whatever works best for you guys. But yeah, it's really, is this generally what you're looking for, what you're expecting from us? And with that blessing, then we're going to go ahead and start waitlisting. But this is not at a later future date. We would like to be moving people into the January. We'd like to be moving people in by January. So.
Councillor LaBerge. There we go.
I mean, we actually don't have a decision to make. I mean, we need a manager to take care of them. But something that you said, so these are all electrically heated?
That's how you get CMHC money.
Councillor Hawes.
Yeah, I'd look to administration for the exact wording, but I'm prepared to make the motion. I mean, I think that, we've gone down the path already. The application included you as the manager, but at the time you came the first time, we didn't have really that detail of what now, where do we move forward now that the building is there. So I'm prepared to make, if administration has a recommendation for wording, to move forward in a service agreement or whatever that is, I'm prepared to make that motion at this time.
Through the mayor to members of council. So I just want to make sure that everyone's clear, because I think council really does have a decision to make, and I don't, if I was misinterpreted, I apologize, but these are the town's facilities. The town has control over the demographics. We have made agreements and we have made commitments through getting CMHC funding to say that we're going to make our best effort to fill the 10 units with for 4 people with Aboriginal descent and 4 people with physical disabilities. What we're proposing here is that, the rest and how that exactly that is managed and the nuances and who fits best within the global scheme of our housing, affordable housing in Hinton, that be more or less delegated to the Evergreen Foundation in order to manage that appropriately. So I just wanted to make that clarification if I wasn't clear before.
So it sounds like we have to bring a draft service agreement. So something of the nature of council direct administration to bring a draft service agreement with the Evergreens Foundation at a future meeting of council.
That's correct.
I love that wording. Thank you, Mayor Michaels. I'll make that motion.
And I'll just give Ms. Davy Campbell a moment to get that on the floor, and then I'll open it up for debate. Service agreement with the Evergreens Foundation. CO Panasic, would that wording be
through the mayor, just one suggestion to put for the Bhutan lands. That'd be my only suggestion.
That'll be a second. Councillor Hawes, are you okay with the wording?
If I may, maybe instead of Bhutan lands, maybe the CMHA or CMH, whatever the acronym is, that land, just for now, because the Bhutan's land's a large area. But if we could just identify the CMHA or CMHC project, yeah, maybe that would be okay.
Counselor Haas, are you okay with the wording?
Yeah, I'm okay with the wording if I can speak to it
Yeah.
real quick. As I said, I mean, this was already presented in the funding that we got, that we would have Evergreens, managing this. I think that, this is just the opportunity to seal that deal a little bit and show our collaboration on that. And I mean, when I look at it, I mean, Evergreens Foundation has a great track record, not only in Hinton, but all surrounding communities as well. They're well versed in this area, whereas very few other, I would say organizations could take on this endeavor. So I'm happy to have the Evergreens partnership in this and working together on that and having Kristen and her team. So thank you.
Counselor Taylor.
Yeah, that's okay. Could we add the words that prioritizes seniors' housing needs? And then to my mind, we're fitting in with the priorities of Hinton a little better.
I'll go to Counselor Haas as a friendly amendment and then I'll go to CO Panasic for the process.
Yeah, I wouldn't include that because we would honestly be going against what the funding is for. And I go back to the list that was presented to us. Seniors is part of that, but it's for people and populations who are vulnerable. So I personally don't want to go against that. I'm certain that seniors is part of that requirement, but I don't want to put that in here because it doesn't fit for the funding that we have. So
there's no amendment, friendly amendment accepted. Anything further, Counselor Taylor?
I'd like to know if, in order to know whether to vote for this or not, I'd like to know if we could actually do that.
Am I allowed to talk?
Counselor, okay, sorry, your mic was off. CO Chambers.
So I don't know if I'm allowed to talk in the middle of this, but I do have a thought that maybe a second motion is required to accept the presentation on just about the part of Evergreens in the application piece. And we do have room to assign 2 of those 10 units to seniors. There is still 2 units that, again, we could say make a reasonable effort for Indigenous, for those with physical disabilities, and the 2 remaining units for low-income seniors. That those are open. And again, it's just adding that reasonable effort. It's not going to make any difference to CMHC, but it's still going to recognize that senior piece. And the reality is we're still going to be doing the same thing and look at the vulnerable populations, but we will be making a reasonable effort, which might be a good blend. But I do believe maybe they would be in different motions. The service agreement as one motion, but accepting the presentation with an amendment on the demographic that we'd be serving may be prudent. And I'm sorry if that's out of line, but.
Counselor Taylor.
No, that allows me to say yes to this and then make a follow-up motion. Thank you.
Council, we have a motion on the floor. Any further debate, questions? Counselor Taylor. Council. Seeing CO Panasic.
Mayor, if we could, I believe Mr. Russo would like to speak.
Mr. Russo.
The chair, Mr. Mayor, not to stop the process. I'm just thinking about Bhutan lands and the conversation that's been going on tonight. Would it be appropriate to ask for an amendment to just put in phase 1? Because then it speaks to that specific conversation, encapsulates everything else. Thank you.
Counselor Haas, are you okay with adding phase 1? Okay, thanks. Thank you, administration. Miss Davy Campbell will add phase 1. Any further debate, Council? Counselor Taylor.
I'm sorry, I didn't quite understand that nuance.
Through to the chair too. The reason why I'm saying phase 1 is based on a very specific details of the grant. So if the grant does become much wider in future, then we are not pinned down to the one motion that talks about Bhutan lands. So this specific phase 1, all that's encapsulated through what the grant is stipulating. That's the reason I'm suggesting that.
Counselor Taylor, if you can keep your mic on until the question is finished. There you go. There we go. Oh.
10 units, Councillor.
10 units.
Yeah.
All right.
Council, we have a motion on the floor. Any further debate, questions? Seeing none, I'll call to question the council direct administration to bring a draft service agreement with the Evergreens Foundation for the CMHC project at the Bhutan Lands Phase 1 to a future meeting of council. Council, all those in favor? That's passed unanimously. Councillor Taylor.
Could I make another motion? That the municipal, help me with this, that the municipality make reasonable efforts to maintain 2 of the units for seniors.
I'll go to CEO Panasic first on,
I will double check that with CAO Chambers, but I believe that's appropriate.
Accepting the presentation
Oh, I'm sorry.
as presented with the amendment of adding 2 units, making reasonable effort that 2 units of the 10 would be for low-income seniors.
give Miss Davia Campbell a moment.
Yes, that's what I wanted to say.
I figured, I think read your mind.
Councillor Taylor, are you okay with that wording?
Sure, that looks fine.
Would you like to speak to it?
No, I think that's in keeping with one of the original purposes that we bought the land for, that will maintain some sort of importance for seniors to get in there. So,
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Councillor Haas.
Just a friendly amendment. I heard Chambers state for low-income seniors. Is that important to add? I would suggest adding that, or needs a friendly amendment if Councillor Taylor's.
Councillor Taylor, are you okay with that?
I mean, they have to meet the criteria to be housed here anyways, and this more than low income, but if you want to add it, I don't care.
Council, we have a motion on the floor. Any debate or questions? Councillor Race.
Sorry, just a little thing, Mr. Mayor, Jen, reasonable?
It's okay. Those typos will
Okay, they'll
fix
take-
themselves. Okay, council, any further questions? Seeing none, I'll call to question to accept the Evergreens Foundation presentation as presented and to make reasonable efforts to maintain 2 of the 10 units for low income seniors. Council, all those in favor? That's passed unanimously. Council, anything further for this item? Seeing none, Kristen, it's always a pleasure to have you with your wealth of knowledge. We appreciate what the Evergreens Foundation does and specifically for tonight on this joint partnership to provide added units that will greatly benefit our community. So we thank you for your time and all your answers, and we look forward to having this brought back to council in the near future. Thanks again. Council. That will bring us to our second item for this evening, and that will have myself to speak to it. That's the AFPA Rail Advocacy. Okay, we'll take a 5, I can do that. Yeah, 5-minute recess. Thank you very much. Outside of our community, but still impacts in Western Alberta about the rail services. Industry, including West Fraser, through the AFPA, can advocate and work, and we're at a point where the service delivery has been problematic in this strange, I think they call it duality. It's where it's two partners really provide the entire service with CP and CN. And through the AFPA, we believe that, or they believe that a municipal push to lobby is better than industry doing it, where local officials in communities that have mills or affected by agriculture in rail delivery can have a stronger voice together. So the AFPA, through this dialogue with communities, including Edson, Whitecourt, Grand Prairie, Hinton, developed a game plan of doing a marketing and branding strategy to lobby stronger. And with that, a $35,000 ask was made, and the AFPA, through their own budget, is willing to allocate $15,000, and that leaves the remainder of the municipalities to pick up the total of $20,000. In my conversations as recent as this afternoon with Brock Mulligan, 5 have confirmed through motions their allocations, and 7 more are coming. So the amount the AFPA would be looking at is about $2,000 at this time. And then once we have the entire $35,000, the AFPA will begin this strategy in order to lobby in efforts through the AFPA to hear the voices of municipalities asking the federal government to get more involved in making sure that the service delivery, that is the availability of train cars, switching stations, things that can delay the delivery of services, have a huge impact on businesses in our municipalities. And the model has to be revisited. So a collective approach with municipalities to begin this lobbying is the concept. The ask is, I believe, quite small, $2,000 now, with the confirmation of 5 already confirmed, in order to support West Fraser through the AFPA to begin this process and see where this leads us. So that would be my desired motion of council, but open to any questions, comments, or directions. I have Councillor Haas.
Yeah, thank you for that, because I was curious on what is it they're not doing, but what I'm hearing them say is it's not about cost or anything, it's about they're not delivering the service. So there would be certain standards that we'd be lobbying for, that, you know, there's X amount of switching stations, there's X amount, or that's what the lobbying, what I'm hearing would entail. And I see also to back into the people as well. So I'm not sure, but you know, making sure that they have enough staff or whatever it may be infrastructurally and personnel. Is that the idea?
Yeah, that's the
Okay.
concept.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Councillor Taylor.
Sure. I'm all in favor of advocacy. I'm all in favor of advocacy for our local industries. In fact, personally, I've done this over the years. Advocated for the coal industry, advocated for other industries. So totally in favor of that. The concern I have here is when you add taxpayer dollars into the mix. And I have a concern, and I have a bunch of questions I have to ask myself before I should support this, and I have to answer that. And some of those questions are, these type of requests are now starting to come in weekly to us, $1,000 the week before, $4,000 this week. You know, as long as we have contingency funds, we can expect a continuation of these type of unplanned requests. I have to ask myself, do I really think that we should have a contingency fund? A second question I'd have to ask myself, is this what taxpayers' dollars are for? Is this a core service to taxpayer, or is the money going to be spent within our town boundaries? I also have to ask myself the question, do we want to engage in third-party advocacy for the forest industry and provide money for it? By all means advocacy, but not money part. Why not the coal industry or the oil and gas industry or other industries? Another question is there a direct benefit or a clearly defined return for the Hinton taxpayers? I'd have to ask myself about that. And finally, I'd have to ask myself, financially, the forest industry has done very well in the last 2 to 3 years. So why does the taxpayer of Hinton have to pay for this service? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Councillor LaBerge.
Thank you. And for me, when I look at the four goals of the initiative, I don't know. I mean, really, we're going to go to these companies and say that we're going to impose a cross-sectoral requirement on you, meaning you got to supply so many cars to the lumber industry and so many cars to the agriculture, I guess. Then it says to maintain service levels through the winter. I mean, if it's not profitable, I don't know, you're going to go to these companies and say you have to do that. A legislative ban on auctioning cars. I mean, so we're going to tell them how they're going to run their private business, and then to tell them to increase their investment in their rolling stock. Like, the goals of this thing, cool. If we can get support for the lumber industry or for our industries here, that's good. But when I look at these goals, man, I don't know about the how. I mean, I'm a private industry guy, and these sorts of asks make me personally nervous.
Thank you, Councilor LeBears. Council, any further debate, questions? Councilor Haas.
Just a quick question about the money, and this is to administration, because there's been a bit of about the contingency fund and what's in there. It was brought to my attention that the Autumn Festival was not taken out of there, but there was still the matter of the Timberwolves. Is there any confirmation of what is in that fund at this time?
Through the mayor's member of council. So it is true that there's $19,000 remaining in that fund. We did commit in 2021 to up to 12,500 for the Timberwolves in 2022. So we'll likely see some reconciliation from that at the end of the year. So even if we were to exhaust all of the 12,500, that still would $6,500 would be remaining in that fund.
Thank you.
You're in the queue. One moment. Yeah. Councilor Taylor.
Oh, thank you. My follow-up would be that in the budget session on Saturday, we decided to vote against the $30,000 for increasing the contingency fund in order to take the existing $20,000 into this year. Is there still $20,000 to take into this year?
Through the mayor's member of council. So the 2023, we have budgeted for $20,000. We did not budget for 50.
Okay.
So that will be, that's remains in the budget. Yeah. Yeah. The $20,000 I'm referring to actually is for the 2022 year. So, so we do have this available to us until the end of the year. If we do want to look at this in 23, it would have to come out of the next year's budget.
Where's it up? Thanks.
Thank you, Councilor Taylor. Council, any further directions, comments? If not, I'll relinquish the chair and put forward a motion. Option number 2 with a maximum of $2,000. And I'll speak to that once it's up there. And with that, the Deputy Mayor's Councilor LeBears, so I'll relinquish the chair duties to Councilor LeBears. And if I may speak to the motion.
As long as you push the button.
Right, okay. I agree with some of the comments from a approach from a municipality having a contingency fund. This is much greater. This is the AFPA in West Fraser to support them in everything they do in the community. I would ask yourself if $2,000 when West Fraser and what they do for the community in order to do a joint approach, to me, it just doesn't express any partnership. I asked council, when is the last time West Fraser came to something? They asked us for an investment for the ligament tax reduction to offset some of their costs for future investments. But those are monies that they pay. They do a lot. The AFPA is just not some organization that's somewhat small in our municipality that is asking for contingency dollars. This is something big. The wheels start turning in September, and that's why it's unplanned. But as much as it's unplanned, it's extremely planned. This is working with Jason Cripps. This is working with the AFPA and our local mill and our partners throughout the province on something that's been an ongoing issue. So I ask, is it really the detailed information? I don't know if councillors reached out. It was in the package to speak to Brock Mulligan from the AFPA for any questions or clarification. So I really urge council, unless there's something explicit in order to not support our largest tax contributor in the community who asks us for very little but does so much in order to begin this process and to leave the strategic approach to a professional group through AFPA and in industry professionals who I argue know more than us regarding this. Sure, could there be situations where there's uncertainty? Of course, but I challenge again, what is the alternative to these rail issues in the community throughout Alberta? And I'm open to an alternative approach, but for the AFPA to ask and recommend that this is the approach, I strongly support the AFPA and West Fraser in this endeavor. Councillor Stash. Oh, my apologies, Councillor Stashik.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Now that there's a motion on the table, I'm happy to speak to it. I've got concerns about the motion too and the appropriateness of using taxpayer dollars to advocate for private industry. I almost always support advocacy when a group comes to us and is asking for municipal help to try and bring some attention to their concerns. This one's no different. I would have no problem with the municipality advocating by providing letters, communications, whatever we can do to indicate how important the industries that are affected are to our local economy. But beyond that, I'm not sure I would want to advocate for some of the things, as Councillor LaBerge referred to, that were in the document that we were provided. I don't believe I'm knowledgeable enough to be able to speak to them, but my main concern with this is use of taxpayer dollars to pay for the privilege of advocating. I can't get my head around, and I haven't had it explained to me yet, why the AFPA can't provide the funding for the advocacy themselves and just request whatever other non-financial support municipalities are willing to give them. That's what I'd be willing to give unless I hear something different. At this point, I'm not ready to commit any dollars to it. Thank you.
Into queue next and follow up on that for the same philosophical reasons. I wouldn't support this either.
Thank you, sir. So, Mr. Mayor, Brock Mulligan is who again?
He represents the AFPA through communications, marketing, and regional outreach.
Okay, so here's what I've written down. Private industry has provided here in our town jobs to many, many people. They have assisted us with our water over the last 50-some years. Here in town, they are a major contributor to tax dollars to our revenue. And I have to look at the impact of saying no to something like this. What will that do to us years from now? I would not say no, so I would support this motion.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I mean, I hear all the councillors' comments and I don't disagree with any of them. But I guess I look at for the town of Hinton, this is what is the risk to the town of Hinton that if this industry were not to supply services to the level in which are required, what could that do to the industry, the forest industry in our community? What would that do with the stakeholders in our community? And it could be devastating. As Councillor Ray said, they do employ a great deal of citizens of our community. That being said, I mean, I want to be responsible with our taxpayers' dollars, of course, but if we can invest and collaborate with other partners to improve services that can improve that industry, keep that industry going, for our taxpayers in our community, and work with other communities as well. And collaboration is always a big part of our strategic plan. And this is an opportunity to reach out. I realize that it's private business, but we have the right to advocate for private business to give more services to in our community. So I'm still not totally convinced, but I'm leaning on the side of supporting this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't know if anybody here has an answer for me. I'm going to assume likely not, but I don't really understand why the AFPA is reaching out to municipalities for financial support when I think it would be more powerful if they were to get financial and documentation support from other industry associations. In my day-to-day job, I work with industry associations that ship by rail, and I'm more than familiar with the challenges that they have. It winds up that we're challenged as a local business in our ability to be able to provide services locally because of the very issues that the AFPA is bringing up. That shipping by rail is unreliable. There's challenges to it. They lose cars. They can't find cars. It's extremely challenging. So to me, I think going to organizations like the Canadian Cement Association or the Coal Producers of Canada, those kinds of industries that do heavy shipping by rail would serve them a lot more, would serve them a lot better. I shouldn't say better, but would serve them as well as testimonials from municipalities about how it could affect the communities that these businesses are in. I think if there's some pushback from other industries, including the AFPA, it would throw a lot of weight behind the argument that the rail shippers are not adequately providing services to all of the industries that they serve, not just the AFPA. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I believe I have part of the answer, and it's whether we believe or anyone on council believes it's the right approach or not. And I understand there's different ways of attacking it. The concept was it wasn't working the other way through industry. And this is what the AFPA through Jason Cripps was saying, that no movement is done with the federal government and CNNCP through other manners. It's just not working. So what could we do to add a political element? And that is shifting the energy of bringing this to a federal attention to exactly fix some of these problems, because it's been ongoing for, I believe, decades. And the approach is looking for something different. Municipalities did not take this approach. I can't guarantee it's going to work, but I can guarantee you that it hasn't worked the other way. And to me, this is a small investment, which through the AFPA and their experience and agriculture and the players who are at least around the table at this moment believe a municipal-led lobbying approach is a better way to potentially get some responses, because it just literally would go on deaf ears before it was communicated to us. So again, open to other approaches, but to me, industry hasn't been able to do it. And the idea for the FPA only contributing 15,000 was to get some, a lack of a better term, but it's some skin into the game, showing that municipalities are willing to at least start this process and support it, where it's not just the AFPA again, it's municipalities who are serious, and this will continue. Now, could it have been done the other way? Absolutely. But to me, this was just a decision, say, hey, municipalities are serious. We'll put some small seed money to start this. We will lobby from a municipal approach and try to have the voices heard for the first time. So that's the concept. Agree to disagree on what the alternative should be. But again, that I wanted to share the train of thought that went into the process for this to go to a municipally led approach.
Sorry. 5 municipalities have already bought into this and we're waiting on 7 right now.
Correct.
Okay, so that would be, 12, 13 municipalities who hopefully will put that $2,000 forth. I'll tell you, I do not want to be one of the 12, 13 municipalities who says no to this. We are a mill town. We are a mill town. The revenue that we collect from the mill certainly has helped us for many, many years. And I, of course, will definitely support this.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just one more time, I want to reiterate that I'm not at all against advocating for the cause that they're proposing. I fully support it. I understand it and I agree with it. I just do not feel that. So first of all, I haven't been given a reason yet why there's an expectation of a financial ask from municipalities. I don't buy the argument about having skin in the game. We have skin in the game. We have citizens and we have businesses that rely on that. I don't think we need to contribute financially to be able to pay a lobbyist who can go and try and make changes to the industry. I have concerns that if I support this and if council supports this, it sets a precedent of when other people come to us and want financial contributions towards advocacy, we're not going to have any way to be able to tell them no. And honestly, I actually feel that we have too much skin in too many games right now. And looking at the budget, looking how things are going, looking what's coming before us, I think we need to pull back a little bit. This is one of the things that I'm going to take a stand on pulling back a little bit. Thank you.
Before we move on, are there any other thoughts? If not, we have a motion on the floor. Could you make it a little bigger, please? And I'll call it the question. The council allocate a maximum of $2,000 from the council contingency fund to participate in the objectives of the Alberta Rail Advocacy Coalition. Is the rest part of it? Okay, thank you. And with that, I call it the question. All in favor? Opposed? And it's defeated 4-2.
Council, anything further? I have Councillor Stashik. Sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Is there any provision or any request for any other type of assistance that we could provide in terms of advocacy, letters of support, letters of agreement, anything like that on behalf of the municipality to communicate how this is affecting industry in our community and by extension our citizens?
At this moment, no, but I would suspect once this gets off the ground that there'll be some outreach in order to I guess strengthen their support. So nothing at imminent right now.
Okay, hopefully that does come forward and there's something happens in the future where we as a council can do something to show our support without a commitment of taxpayer dollars. Thank you.
Councillor Taylor.
I was thinking the same thing. I'm wondering if it would be appropriate to proactively put a motion up that council indicate through the mayor that to the Alberta Rail Advocacy Coalition that we are prepared to provide letters of support for this initiative. Would that be of help to you? If not, that's fine.
Yeah, I'd have to give it some thought. I definitely couldn't hurt, but I'm just trying to see with their current trajectory of what they're doing and what that lends to. I think to Councillor Stashik's point is once the group has made clear what their asks will be of municipalities, I think that would be the moment in order to provide that support.
That's fine. Thank you.
Council, anything further for 3.2 before we move on? Seeing none, that brings us to our adjournment. Council.